To me, that is the other side of potential. It's not just what am I manifesting in terms of my career and money and, climbing the ladder and titles or whatever it might be, but it's like, who am I in terms of my own character and what am I doing in the world to make the world a better place?
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, welcome back. This is the Uncommon Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Gallagher. Real excited about my conversation today with Dr. Sharon Spano. She's going to talk about something that, frankly, has been on my heart a bunch lately, and that's this idea of how do I be successful and feel fulfilled at the same time, or is there a gap there? Dr. Spano is she has a PhD in human organizational systems. She blends science and personal development to guide CEOs and consultants and entrepreneurs toward radical growth. So I look forward to talking about that in terms of a topic as well. She's also the host of a podcast, The Other Side of Potential. Those of you watching on video can see that behind her shoulder there, and the author of The Pursuit of Time and Money. She shares her insights today on breaking free from the emptiness of success and to live life with purpose. So Dr. Spano, welcome to the Uncommon Leader Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on board. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely. I am as well. And I'll start you off with the same question that I always ask my first time guests because it's kind of fun. But to ask you to tell me a story from your childhood that still impacts who you are today as a person or as a leader.
That's such a big question, but when I thought about that, the answer is kind of easy for me in that, and this may sound contrary to popular belief, but my parents were divorced. And actually, that turned out to be a blessing in that my father, after a few years, got custody of us, and we were placed with my paternal grandmother. And it was not easy because we were not really wanted there by my sister and I. When I say we, my aunts and uncles, my grandmother lived with them. They had their own family, and we were really not wanted. And it was very well known that we were not wanted. I mean, I felt it very much as a 4 or 5 year old, whatever I was. But my grandmother turned out to be just the beacon in my life in that she gave me my faith. She taught me so many things. One being she lost her son in the war, and looking back, you and I have talked about my losing my own son
Mm.
years and years later. But I realized my son was disabled. My grandmother also was disabled, so she really prepared me for being an advocate for people with disabilities. I didn't even realize that until I went into my master's program and I was writing a book about my own son. And my professor said, your grandmother needs to be in this book because
Mm.
she was the first, your first experience with disability. So she gave me my faith. She taught me about disability. She also taught me about grief and how to lose a son. And I felt as prepared as you can be when you lose a child as a result of having lived with her and hearing the stories all my whole life about my uncle. So he died in the war, but she was the one. And my book, Isabel's God, is named after her.
Wow. I love, first of all, I love stories of grandmothers who have had positive impacts on us, but I truly love you sharing also the story about your son as well. And as you talked about in your book, as you go through that and talking about that journey, oftentimes the people that we help the most are the ones we were so much like when we were young or when we went through certain things inside of our career. I know many of the times I talk about who do I talk to in podcasts and things like that. It's that person that I was 25 years ago looking to kind of grow. And so you have a tremendous opportunity. So I am condolences on your loss. I know that's something you've had to work through in your career, and clearly something you're able to show others and how to get through that. So let's dive right in. Ultimately, in terms of the topic that I'm here to talk about, you talk about a topic breaking free from the emptiness of success and to live with purpose. So, what's the emptiness of success? How do I know I have it? What are the signs of it in terms of how you coach people?
Yeah, it's such a great question because early in my career, I felt like I worked with a lot of people who were climbing the ladder. And then in the last 10 years, as we've seen people catapult to wealth and success and prosperity, as a result of the internet and all these pop-ups and, angel investors. And we've just seen a lot more people at a lot more younger ages acquire a certain level of or a high level, I should say, of success. And then I began to notice in my clients what I'm now calling the emptiness of success, meaning, they have the $1 million plus house, multiple $1 million plus house, the multiple cars, all the toys, but they're not happy. They don't feel fulfilled. And I usually get them along somewhere in that spectrum. Maybe they're still trying to build the business or scale it, but they've got the money, but they're just not happy. And there's sort of this deeper question of, is this all there is? And I just feel, my work is grounded in human development, as you know, and there are 12 stages of human development. So the average American in our workforce is at stage 5 or 6. So there's room there, obviously, for a lot more of developmental growth in terms of our worldviews and perceptions. And so we really first identify where the pain or the emptiness is. And often they don't even really know. It's something often that they originally think from a concrete perspective. I'm having trouble with my partner, for
Mm.
example, or I'm not really connected to my kids, or I don't have time for XYZ, or I'm having trouble with my team. So it'll be initially something very obvious and concrete, but that's usually not the answer. There's usually an abstract, something beneath all of that that we have to, look at. So for an example, I worked all last year with a gentleman who was having trouble with a partner, and they were best friends along the way. And of course, he's trying to preserve the friendship as well as the business. And yeah, that's a very real piece. And so we could talk about tactics around that. But the deeper wound came, and it took us a little while to get there. The deeper wound came from anger issues that we then discovered were a result of embarrassment. And the embarrassment came from some experiences that he had had in his early childhood.
Hmm.
So we go back, I'm not talking about looking, it's not therapy. I'm not a therapist. We're not looking back in the way that we would in therapy, although I think there's a time and a place for that. But I like to say to my clients, we're going to look backward just long enough to discover what's really going on here, but we're not going to stare at the page.
So I love that, and you can tell about those different stages. We could dive into that a little bit. We get to a certain point because I think about these leaders and many that I work with as well. They've got, to your point, they've got the book definition of success. They've got a successful business, which has resulted, to your point, in multiple items of stuff, homes,
Mhm.
cars, boats, whatever those things are, trips, and all those things that they have. But how do they end up coming to you then? There's something that's missing, right? Because I
Yeah.
often talk about will change when the displeasure of remaining the same is greater than the change of the or greater than the pain of the change itself. And so they're coming to you probably saying, I need to scale my business, but you know right off the bat that's not where they are. How do you get them there?
Right. Well, often they know they're unhappy. That'll be it. They'll know
Hmm.
they're unhappy. Pardon me. And so and often they really can't even define what happiness would look like for them because they've spent a big part of their lives thinking, I will be happy if I acquire XYZ. But now I have XYZ and I'm still not happy. So we have to kind of, again, get to the root. And I think that's where coaching or consulting comes in. Is it's very difficult to get to the root of the issue by yourself. I mean, obviously, if we could do that, we would just do it. So I think you need to walk alongside someone who can help you really. We're trained as consultants, as coaches, as even therapists, obviously, to listen to what's not being said. And then I do things, I have a 12-week process called Potential Unleashed, where I bring together all of my training and experience in the field. It's really a hybrid of everything I've experienced throughout the many years that I've been in the field, in and out of corporate America. And I have certain tools in there. And one of those tools is we look at the genogram, which is looking at the family history, because we know now that many things that we carry come through the family line, literally. And so I find it's very interesting in that some of my clients may be unhappy, but they have a perfect life. And that unhappiness comes from what we call in my business a hidden loyalty to an ancestor. So, for instance, if
Mm.
my mother was never happy, now I have the perfect marriage and wonderful kids and a great business and a loving husband. Well, how can I be happy? My mother was never happy. And I carry that internally without even knowing that that's happening. So then I have processes that help us break through those perspectives and reframe whatever is going on in the individual's life.
I love that as a process. Jefferson Bethke, John Tyson wrote a book that I read last year called Fighting Shadows. And
Mhm.
some of those shadows really were those things that kept us from becoming the person who we were called to be, whether it's, from the perspective of faith or it's from the perspective of business. One of the shadows that I identified, there were one word, was ambition.
Mhm.
The other one is guilt,
Right.
and even the third one being shame. Three of those seven, they're coming back to me as you tell those
Right.
stories. And so you're talking about that even in recognizing that it goes back further. You talk a good bit about how to balance ambition, which can be shadow, it can be both a good thing and a bad thing, with
Right.
fulfillment. So in your experience, what are some of those struggles that cause that for leaders to um, have an out of balance with ambition and fulfillment?
Well, I think what you just stated is very accurate in that, pardon me. Um, when you say guilt, I think of my own career and how unwittingly my own mother constantly made me feel guilt and shame over my success and my husband's success with just a phrase. She would say, "Well, that must be nice. I never got to do that." If we were going on a trip or we bought a new house or and it took me many, many years when I wrote the book on time and money. I wrote it because I was seeing that many of my clients had either a lot of time and no money or a lot of money and no time. And so I looked at the experience of time and money through the lens of developmental growth. And that was one of my growing edges was I had to get past my own scarcity perspectives and shame over success. I was always very driven, and I came from a very poor family, and so I was driven to get out of those environments. But then I had this mother who was a very loving mother, and honestly, again, did not mean to create that in me, but I would interpret it as shame and guilt because my mother had a hard life. And she never had a marriage like I have. She had three husbands and none of them were very good. And I chose opposite of those three because of her, because I knew I don't ever want to live in that. But I had a lot of shame and guilt about it. And so those are the kinds of things that I see. They're very subtle, again, subconscious things that we all carry out of those hidden loyalties. There's actually four hidden loyalties that we've identified in the research. And everything I do is also looking at the system, both the personal system, family system, individual system, as well as the organizational system. So when you look at those principles, it's very easy for my clients then to go, oh, that's me. I have a hidden loyalty to my mother, my father, or oh, there was an uncle or there was a grandfather, who was a philanderer, and I see that in my family line, and I don't want to go in that direction. I always say, with the first moment of awareness comes opportunity for change. So I'm really kind of the mirror. I'm the crucible. I'm holding up the mirror, and then when they start to see themselves, part of what I do is teach them how to witness themselves in the moment. Then the change is more automatic.
Hey, listeners, I want to take a quick moment to share something special with you. Many of the topics and discussions we have on this podcast are areas where I provide coaching and consulting services for individuals and organizations. If you've been inspired by our conversation and are seeking a catalyst for change in your own life or within your team, I invite you to visit coachjohngallagher.com/free call to sign up for a free coaching call with me. It's an opportunity for us to connect, discuss your unique challenges, and explore how coaching or consulting can benefit you and your team. Okay, let's get back to the show.
I'm writing a note here because I think you flew by it so fast, and maybe you've just said it so many times. So the first sign of awareness provides an opportunity to make a change. That's a huge statement. I want folks to kind of almost, again, I don't often say rewind or whatever that is. You hit the 15-second back or 30-second back button to listen to that quote and make sure it's correct. But again, we're also back to you're able to help others because you went through it, because you
Right.
experienced it, because you had those things. And so aside from yourself, is there a client, without sharing anything that you're not allowed to share, who you have been able to help that you frankly feel really, I'll use the term proud of, it might not be the right word, but certainly
Yeah.
feel fulfilled with being able to help them out and what that story was like?
Yeah, let me just for 1 second call attention and thank you for stopping me on that quote because I do say it so often, but I think that what's important about it is typically when we have a moment of awareness about something, to use your language and common psychological language, a shadow within us, we go to shame. And my mission in life is to help people go, no, when you have that awareness, that's really God just knocking you on the head, going, here's a moment for growth. Let's go with that instead of going to shame, because there's no shame, as we know, and certainly from a spiritual perspective, has no place in God's world.
That's right.
So I wanted to say that. And then in terms of clients, well, I have to say I'm so proud for all of them because they all do such tremendous work. But when you ask the initial question, I'm getting a lot of younger people in their 30s who already feel like they've failed because they're
Mm.
comparing themselves to the world. And I recently had just this amazing young man, 32 years old, when he came to me, felt like he was failing because, quote, I only have a condo. And I can't have all of my relatives here to my home because I only have a condo. And he's a young married man with a new baby. And I said, let's reframe that. You don't only have a condo, you have a $500,000 condo in California, which very few 32-year
Hmm.
olds could probably pull off. Plus, he's got an amazing job. He's a brilliant young man. But what we discovered in the work with him was this need to prove himself, which was actually sabotaging his success in the company, came from one sentence that his father was an immigrant and he was born here in the United States. And one sentence that his father said, similar to my mother, just not even realizing the impact it would have on his boy, is that you always have to work very hard here in America or you will be left behind. And so, no matter, and you can just see a father innocently saying that, giving advice to his boy, but he was like 6 at the time. And what it instilled in him was this need to prove myself I'm never going to be enough. And he was carrying that. So we were able to do the work, embrace his culture, embrace his father's wisdom, and reframe that wisdom and free him up. So that he now knows, no, I am enough, and look what I've done, and you look yet how much further I can go, and bless the rest of my family. So it was when we finished the 12-week session, we both were in tears because I hated to let him go, but he was ready. And what he said to me at the end was one of the greatest things any of my clients has ever said. Because he in the final moments he said, "I'm trying to figure out why I'm so emotional about this parting." And he said, "I think it's because it's the first time I have ever really felt seen by anyone." And I want to thank you for that. And that to me was, I mean, that's the essence of my work. That's what I'm trying to do everywhere I go is help people belong and feel seen because there's enough places where we feel we're not enough and don't belong. And we certainly don't need any more of that in our lives.
Hey man, those the solution sometimes is to some of those shadows, to some of those words that we talked about, are just affirmations in yourself. First, again, both of you, at least both of us, what I hear from you in terms of faith is that we recognize that we are made in the image of God, and there were no accidents, and we are great in His eye, and that's the only eye that we need, if you will.
Mhm.
But outside of that is creating what I heard you say too are these almost affirmation statements, these I am statements that
Mhm.
folks are talking about, that I am worthy, that I am enough, that I
Yeah.
am, and again back to faith, a child of God, or I
Yeah.
am successful, and regardless of what I was told before, those are just not true statements. And being able to start to believe and have faith, and then be faithful to those activities is so important. I appreciate you sharing that story. And the impact you had, I can sense that in your voice, how much that meant to you. It's like those mic drop moments when somebody
Yeah.
says something like that. You're like, my work is done. And you could almost say, turn the phone off and I don't have to talk to anybody else anymore. That's how I want it to end, so to speak,
Yeah.
is to
Yeah.
hear something like that. I appreciate you sharing that. Let's shift just a little bit about you. Your podcast, back behind your shoulder there, those watching on YouTube, is titled The Other Side of Potential. So let's break down that title a little bit. Tell me what you see as potential and how you define that. And then what's the other side? Tell me a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, we decided, and I'm actually rebranding it, but with great hesitation because I love this title. But we decided on the other side when I started this several years ago because we realized that I was always working with people for to the greater end, not just about scaling the business. I ran across in my career as I traveled across North America, and I was in and out. One point, I was in 100, like 100 and some odd cities a year. Um, it was ridiculous, and so I started to really see that again, people were scaling and working hard and climbing that ladder, but again, the self leadership part was missing that. And to me, that is the other side of potential. It's not just what am I manifesting in terms of my career and money and, climbing the ladder and titles or whatever it might be, but it's like, who am I in terms of my own character and what am I doing in the world to make the world a better place? And so the other side of potential to me is looking at the whole self, because I don't believe we can compartmentalize. We're not one way at work and then we come home and kick the dog and beat
Mm,
the wife. We need to be whole leaders. And so that was in the beginning, I was only interviewing CEOs to talk about, how they did in fact manage the complexity of their businesses and the world they were living in the context of living what I call an integrated life, because I'm not sure that I really believe it's semantics, but I don't really believe that balanced life can ever be fully realized
mhm,
because life hits us. So, for instance, when my son was critical, he was critical for 4 years and we were just in and out of hospitals. I had to make decisions. You keep the business going, but you don't have time to go to the gym. You don't have time. I barely could get to church on Sunday because I was at the hospital. So, you're always making decisions on the whole life as you're trying to keep the business going and manage your family and your own health and all of those things. So, to me, that is the other side of potential. It's looking at all of it.
mm. Love that. And I love the holistic approach too. I think it's to your point, you cannot compartmentalize as a leader. It just doesn't work. I mean, then now you're talking about character and integrity and all those things that start coming into play with the rest of those people outside of your life. And I think you're spot on. It actually makes a lot of sense. Let's bring it on the bottom shelf for folks then just a little bit because you talk about a term from hustle to harmony. What does that look like practically for executives? What are two or three things they can do to move from hustle, the badge of honor of busyness, to harmony, which because there's probably no real balance to your point that exists
Right,
in
right.
life, but harmony's good.
I think, I'm having to do more and more work around this, even with very high level people. And I think the first thing is to recognize that at the end of the day, it is never going to be done. I'm meeting more leaders who are like, well, I don't have enough hours in the day. And I think you have to, at some point, identify 2 to 3 things, major things that you're going to accomplish each day, each week, each quarter, and be realistic that because of the world we're living in and the technology that is at our fingertips, we're constantly being bombarded with text, emails, Voxers, all these things. At some point, just saying the day is over. And now my time and really I'm working with someone right now. I'm having to teach him how to be present with his
Mm,
own family because they're all on their cell phones through dinner and and you can't expect to have harmony with your teenagers if you've not been present to them throughout their lives. So, it's a hard sell here, but to me is the hustle is making decisions about these are the main things for the day, like I said, and then get those done and then lay it down and be okay with that
mm,
and be present wherever you are. When I'm on vacation, like I was in Boca last week for Easter, for 3 days with friends, I'm in Boca with friends. And doesn't mean I don't pick up my phone and check a thing here or there, but I have the greater intention of being present wherever I am. And that took me many years to learn how to do that. And I attribute it to my son, because with Michael, being disabled, he required a lot. He was like having 5 or 6 children many times. And I just had to learn how to integrate the complexity of him because he was multiple systems in one, and then the work that I'm doing and about, and then somewhere in there trying to fit in a husband. So that was, but we both had the same priority, which was always Michael, and so that made the marriage work, and also was what helped us sustain through the loss. Was the commitment was always there to him and then each other.
That's it. I think about this like we want this airplane mode button for our life.
Yeah,
Ultimately,
I
that the
like that.
distractions are turned off. I don't know. I kind of thought that almost like a title of a book. I want to live in airplane mode or something like that
Yeah, yeah,
with regards to what's there. I want to stay there because you've mentioned your son a few times, and I really haven't given you the opportunity to tell that story, but I know it helps you with your clients as well. Tell me the story a little bit more deeper about your son, what you all went through, and then how you actually practically were able to stay in airplane mode as you dealt with that so that you could still have your relationship with your husband and still have your business
yeah.
and still have these things.
Well, it's a big question. I don't know that we always did it perfectly all the time. But again, it was all about intention. So the short answer is my son was born with a very rare metabolic disorder. We had no warning. I had a perfect pregnancy. Um, and it manifested in that originally he was only supposed to live to two, is what they told us. He lived to 27, but he
Hmm.
was physically impaired, never able to walk as a result of, so he was what we would term developmentally delayed, and that he physically was again unable to walk. And then his body just started to give out. And as I said, he was critical for 4 years. So it was a very long, hard battle. Um, I think the my work in part was what kept me going, because you think every day today's going to be better, and you've got clients and you've got to focus on them. And it got me out of the hospital, and it gave me a break, if you will, from the calamity that we were living, but also my faith. I knew, I was born Christian. I lived that life, and I was very deeply involved in a church here in Orlando where I live, and the community, the support of pastors and neighbors and friends and all of that, got us through. When you're going through something like that, again, you don't even know how traumatic it is until you're on
Hmm.
the other side of it, because you're in survival, but he had an amazing life. He was an amazing human being. And he did, to go back to your question, he created in me a level of unconditional love that I don't know I would have been capable of otherwise. And then that prepared me for empathy. And you can imagine the amount of heartache I would hear, for instance, as I traveled around the country. Literally every day, people would be at my podium telling me about something that was going on in their lives. And that was a crucial turning point for me, because it's when I started to see the very detrimental effects of poor leadership in the stories that I heard of from other people in the workforce. And then I developed a whole process for leadership development. And it enabled me to really walk between the two worlds of the executive C-suite and the workforce, and have compassion and empathy for both sides, and then bring them together. I think that's one of my strong points, is I'm able to bring, all players together in a collaborative, unconditional way. And all of that is because of Michael. My whole career is really a testament to him.
I love that. I know, again, we have the childhood stories, but then those that are closest to us. And you mentioned the community that's come out of that through your
Yeah.
church, through those around you, and how important that is to have that community. That's another one of those, frankly, those hustle things that leaders can miss is
Yeah.
the development of community and being able to rely on others to help them through situations. And that's we were called to be in community with others, and serve and help each other out. So I appreciate you sharing that story, and I know you've probably shared it many times, and to help folks understand how you got through that, Dr. Span. I can tell your strength that comes through that will go through to your clients as well. So you've got your podcast. You mentioned you're rebranding your podcast. You've wrote a book, Time and Money, back in 2017. You've got a lot of knowledge you're continuing to gain. What's next for you, Dr. Spano? Tell me what's going on in your world.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I've taken up golf. Only a crazy person would take up golf in the third chapter of life, but I've done that. And it's teaching me that there's more than just working. Like I took yesterday morning off to play golf, which is a very hard thing for me to do in the middle of the week. But I've learned to do that, just a couple of hours. So there's golf. And then third quarter, my goal is to start a book. And I'm not
Okay.
quite sure. I've got several ideas of and I was just as I was waiting for you this morning, jotting down some potential titles. But I do want to do some work around the self-leadership and the things that I've learned. And I do love to write, and I just haven't had the time. And then again, we're rebranding the podcast. So um, just keep moving forward. I always say, as long as God puts people in front of me, I'll continue to work. And if there comes a time where I'm no longer relevant or able to serve in that way, then I'll just play more golf, I guess, and
Yeah.
hope for better scores. I don't know.
Well, I'm very excited because I think, that I love the Irma Bombeck quote that I often refer back to is that, at the end of my life, whatever that means, I've exhausted all the gifts that I was given. And if the only gift I got left is to play golf on twice a week on, Tuesday and Thursday mornings, that's what I'll use. And I'll still be
Yeah,
sharing with those that I play golf with. But I want to have used it all up
yeah,
before I'm
exactly.
completed. And I can sense that you're going to do that. How can folks get in touch with you, Dr. Spano?
Well, obviously, I'm on social media, and then SharonSpano.com. And we have a page promoting your podcast. So if you go there, it's SharonSpano.com/uncommon leader. And we have a quiz there called the Leader's Edge, which will help people see where they are, what we call the center of gravity, within 6 of the 12 stages of human development. I'm very excited about this because we work very hard on that. And yeah, SharonSpano.com, and my email, Sharon@SharonSpano.com. I'm pretty easy. Just Google me. I'm pretty much everywhere.
I'll be sure to put those links in the show notes for folks. I want to thank you for adding value to the listeners of the Uncommon Leader podcast. I know, and then certainly by providing that as a free resource with regards to that Leader's Edge test or assessment, I would encourage the listeners to go out and try that out. You never know, maybe that helps to inform your book as well as you strive to put that in place. Finish you with one question, giving you the last word on the podcast. I'm going to give you a billboard. You can put it up in Orlando, there where you're from, or you can put it up anywhere you want to. What's the message you're going to put on that billboard, and why do you put that message on there?
Hmm, That's a tough one. I would say, know thyself, know God.
Hmm.
That's just what comes to the top of my mind, because if we don't know ourselves in the context of God, I'm not sure that we really ever know ourselves. And
I
it's
appreciate you
important.
sharing that. Dr. Sharon Spano, thank you so much for being a guest. I wish you the best going forward, and have a great day.
Thank you. I appreciate it.